Bon après-midi tout le monde. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this public session of Moncton City Council.
Your Worship, all public meetings of Moncton City Council are simultaneously translated. Hearing devices are available. You have the right to address the City Council in your official language of choice. Meetings are also simulcast in both languages on our City of Moncton YouTube channel and can be found tomorrow on our website at moncton.ca. If you have registered with the City Clerk's office prior to the agenda deadline, that being 7 days before the meeting, you will be given 5 minutes for your presentation. All other presentations will be given 2 minutes. You will receive a reminder of 1 minute. It'll flash behind us. No presenter shall speak disrespectful of council, staff, or a member of the general public. The use of offensive or profane language will not be tolerated. Any breach of this guideline may result in the presenter being asked to leave the council chambers at the discretion of the chair. Un service d'interprétation simultanée est offert durant nos réunions. Vous avez le droit de parler dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Les casques d'écoute servant à la traduction sont disponibles. Ces réunions sont diffusées en français et en anglais sur la plateforme YouTube et les réunions sont également diffusées sur l'internet à moncton.ca. Si vous êtes inscrit auprès du bureau de la greffière avant la date limite, c'est-à-dire 16 jours avant la séance, vous aurez 5 minutes pour effectuer votre présentation. Toute présentation du public aura droit à 2 minutes. Vous aurez quelque chose en arrière ici qui va dire qu'il vous reste que seule 1 minute. S'il vous plaît, notez, aucun présentateur ne devra manquer de respect lorsqu'il parlera du conseil, d'un membre du personnel ou du grand public. Le langage blasphématoire et les propos offensants ne seront pas tolérés. Le président ou la présidente pourra demander à tout présentateur qui a enfreint cette directive de quitter la salle du conseil.
Merci, Madame la Greffière. Are there any changes to today's agenda?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Excellent. Is there someone who wishes to move the agenda? Thank you, Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Butler. On the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Next is conflict of interest, les déclarations des conflits d'intérêts.
Okay. I do not see any. I think we're good. Thank you.
We have no minutes or there is nothing for the consent agenda, les soumises à l'approbation du Conseil. First is our public and administrative presentations, les exposés du public et de l'administration. And first up is public presentations, exposés du public. And it's a presentation from the Greater Moncton Homelessness Steering Committee, and it's Andrea Ann, Community Coordinator, that is here.
Welcome, Andrea. I just asked you to turn on your microphone.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Don Arnold and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today to speak on behalf of the Greater Moncton Homeless Steering Committee. During this presentation, I'm going to provide you with a brief overview of GMHSC. I'm also going to highlight our 3-year strategic plan and provide some information regarding point-in-time counts. The Greater Moncton Homeless Steering Committee serves as the Community Advisory Board under the Reaching Home Strategy. It was established in 2000. The committee has witnessed significant changes in the local community and in the strategies to address homelessness. Today, GMHSC is comprised of 30 members, representing a wide range of community organizations as well as government agencies. This diversity helps ensure a comprehensive approach to tackling homelessness in the Greater Moncton area, leveraging variety, expertise, and resources to meet the needs of our most vulnerable populations effectively. I want to take a moment of why I chose this photo to discuss GMHSC. This photo has circulated in our community for several years. For me, personally, it visually demonstrates GMHSC's why. Why we as a committee continue to connect, why we discuss the complexities of what is changing in our community, and why we will continue to advocate for those like him. Just out of curiosity, and with a show of hands from council, may I ask how many of you are familiar with this photo? And keeping those hands raised, may I ask how many of you are familiar with his name? So I'm seeing 3. Thank you. This is Joe. Joe used to sleep outside under the stairs at St. Bernard's Church, located at 43 Botsford Street. He would sleep on the benches at the former Peace Center, located at 22 Church Street. Both of these locations are located in our downtown core. Joseph E. Burke passed on April 16th, 2016. For the next 3 years, we are focused on our strategic plan. From 2025 to 2027, we are going to be focusing on advocacy, communications, as well as workforce development. We've already made progress as a committee in a terms of reference, having a confidentiality agreement signed by all members, as well as an upcoming communications discovery plan for the new year, where we will have information set to be established on public platforms. A pit count, also known as a point-in-time count, is intended to provide a snapshot of those experiencing homelessness on a single night within a defined geographical area. It is one of several tools, it is not the tool, but one of several used to better understand homelessness and can identify trends, inform policy decisions, and can help local and provincial efforts to prevent and reduce homelessness. To date, Greater Moncton has conducted 5 pit counts since 2016, with the most recent taking place on the 20th of November and finishing on the 21st. By continuing, it took place, within 14 facilities involving a total of 15 organizations and 85 volunteers. It is important to recognize that with each pit count, the number of individuals surveyed in our community has increased. In 2016, there were 59 individuals. In 2023, 337, and dare say that our most recent, which will come in February, will be higher. I leave you with this. Our community is strongest when every individual feels safe, supported, and valued, including those who are unhoused. It is our shared responsibility that no one is left behind, that every person has a place to belong, and that dignity and compassion guide all of our actions. By continuing to work together, we break down barriers, challenge stigma, and create a community where everyone, regardless of their housing status, is embraced and uplifted. I thank you again for your time and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions? Councillor Richard, go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for opening our eyes again. You mentioned a number of organizations that went through with you the point of time.
Point in time count?
Thank you.
Yes.
It's been a long day. Can you mention a few of them, or if you,
Certainly,
unless
yes.
you have them all? But
I do have them all. So I could tell you all, and I could tell you the facilities as well.
please.
So John Howard Society, Monarch Landing would have been the facilities, the Bridge to Home Hub, as well as the transitional program. Harvest House, Men's Emergency Shelter, Women's Emergency Shelter, Community Resource Center, Rise Up Center, Transitional Program, as well as the Recovery Program. Youth Impact through Youth Quest Central, as well as their transitional program. House of Nazareth with their emergency shelter. Crossroads for Women with their emergency shelter. Ensemble Drop-In. And then other volunteers came from Social Development, the Southeast Zone, Vitalité Public Health, Horizon Health, GMHSC, Selvis, YW, YMCA Reconnect, ARA Alternative Residents, as well as RCMP.
What a team. Maybe give us a little more on how this gets organized. How do you go into these?
Sure.
Just briefly.
From an organizational standpoint, I actually will lean on my colleague, Louise Marchand, because she really held the organizational part of the pit count. So if I could welcome her to come and speak.
Appreciate it. Just to inform everyone on these are not easy tasks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us today. So my name is Louise Marchand, and I am the Coordinated Access Facilitator for Moncton, a position held with the Human Development Council. So I was the lead for organizing this year's point-in-time count, and I really cannot stress enough, we could not have done this without the support of all of our community organizations, and everybody who's involved in the GMHSC was such a support to be able to make this point-in-time count happen.
It's incredible. Great work.
Thank you very
Really
much.
appreciate it. Please keep it coming.
Yes, thank you. We hope to be able to update with, again, to City Council once our final reporting has come through, likely in February time.
That's great. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la maire. Merci pour votre présentation. Je vois que vous avez beaucoup de vos partenaires ici de la salle, Marc Beliveau, Debbie McInnes aussi. J'ai deux questions. La première, c'est tracez-nous une sorte de bilan des 5 dernières années. Est-ce que c'est une constante augmentation? Est-ce qu'il y a des soubresauts ou c'est vraiment du 5, 10%, 15% de plus par année, là?
Thank you for your question, Daniel Bourgeois. C'était vraiment une grande augmentation chaque année.
Ouais.
C'est par plus que 100 personnes chaque année. Et j'ai dit chaque année, mais c'est chaque 2 ans normalement qu'on fait un point-in-time count. Cette année, c'est différent. Qu'on avait un l'année dernière et on avait un cette année ici. Mais c'est plus que 10%, c'est sûr.
Deuxième question, on a mis comme conseil, excusez, avant que j'arrive, il y avait un investissement de 6 millions à Rising Tide avec la contribution de la province, contribution du fédéral aussi. On a aussi investi de l'argent dans le Habitat et aussi dans Humanity Project, la ferme dans la région de Salisbury. Est-ce que ça fait une différence? Sans doute. Mais est-ce qu'il y en a plus qui rentrent qu'il y en a qui sont traités? Ça serait quand même pas mauvais s'ils rentrent dans le système. Logement d'abord, ils peuvent après ça trouver des services d'appui. Ils sont capables de rétablir une vie normale.
C'est une bonne question et une question forte aussi. C'est sûr que c'est un logement, mais pour ça, vraiment, je veux peut-être vérifier avec des autres qui font ce travail plus long que moi. Mark, could I lean on you?
Excusez.
Merci. Oui, bien sûr, on voit plus de monde qui rentre, qui sort. 2 mois passés, c'était 45 personnes en rentrée, seulement 17 en sortie. On construit les logements abordables, ça marche, on fait le bon processus, on fait les bons investissements. Mais qu'est-ce qu'on voit, c'est depuis la pandémie, on a plus de personnes qui rentrent dans les services qu'on serve, plus qui sortent. Et c'est vraiment, on le voit chaque mois après mois. Et c'est, I'll say it in English, the cost of living is causing a lot of issues right now in our community. People cannot afford rent and food. They have to make a hard decision. Many are choosing to try and stay within their units. On top of that, we do diversion services. So just last year, we did 70 just at Harvest House, trying to keep people housed so they don't enter in homelessness. And so the investments are being made. What we really need is large investments that we've never seen before to get caught up to where we need to go. We are still years behind the investments we need within this sector to make the meaningful change we need to see in our community.
Final sub-question. Are there categories of people, seniors, for instance, younger people, that the numbers are increasing more than other categories?
Again, a great question. I will personally speak to say that if we are looking at a community from solving homelessness, we really need to be looking at it from a preventative lens. Preventative for myself means earlier on, and earlier on for me means younger. from a specific demographic of where there is a larger, that I'll actually lean on Mark.
Yeah, so similar to what Andrew was saying. So we are seeing seniors who can no longer afford to stay in apartments they've been in for 10, 15, 20 years. Those are some of the most heartbreaking situations we see because they end up in the shelter where they should never enter in the first place. We are also seeing an increase in young adult and youth homelessness. That is a trend that we see, and we don't have enough pathways to get them back out. We know that Youth Quest, Youth Impact, many people are building housing to try to curb that, but we're still seeing young people on our streets today at rates we hadn't seen before, while still seeing the same 20 to 50-year-olds on the street as well that have been there for long periods of time. And so what we need to try to balance is how do we prevent people from entering into homelessness and get them out as quickly as possible while not forgetting about the people that have been chronically homeless for years. We can't put a subsection aside to make sure we prevent others from being there in the first place. And so it's a balancing act that our sector faces every day. This is the advocacy that we're doing as a Greater Moncton Homelessness Steering Committee, is to bring light, bring data, and to try to balance the argument on both sides to make sure that everybody gets taken care of in the way that they need it.
Okay, I also assume that we have a member of the city sitting on the steering committee, so if anything that this council and the city can do, obviously the message will come forth and be presented to us
Perfect, thank
differently
you.
than what you are presenting today, for which I am very grateful and appreciative. Thank you very much. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you.
Councillor Leblanc.
Oui. Merci pour votre travail. Tout. Ça doit être difficile, des moments. Deux questions, ou plus une question. C'est, est-ce que vous avez un chiffre approximatif de combien de sans-abri qui sont dans la ville?
C'est difficile à dire tout de suite parce que toujours les numéros sont basés le mois avant. Mais ça, c'est, il y a the Human Development Council. Si vous allez sur leur site web, on va indiquer combien de personnes sont chroniques, puis peut-être un jour sans abri. Mais je vais demander à Louise aussi, parce qu'elle travaille directement pour Human Development Council, si elle avait un numéro spécifique.
Je pense que-
Approximalement.
Oui, je pense que pour le mois passé, c'était environ 550 total qui sont sans abri, mais ce n'est pas une liste complète. Il y a aussi des personnes qui ne sont pas comptées dans ce numéro, mais ils sont quand même sans abri aussi. Sur notre site web, comme Andrea a dit, de sjhdc.ca, on a chaque mois un dashboard qu'on poste pour les trois communautés, Moncton, Fredericton, puis aussi Saint John. Et vous pouvez voir ces numéros directement sur le site web. Et dans les mois qui viennent, on va faire un refresh un peu de cette dashboard. Donc, ça va devenir plus interactif. Comme vous avez demandé en avant, si vous pouvez voir si c'est plutôt les seniors, youth, vous pouvez, ça va devenir plus interactif où vous pouvez choisir et voir les numéros directement.
Ah, merci, j'irai voir. Merci.
Councillor Kingston.
Thank you, Madame Mattis, and thank you, Andrea and Mark. I recall the PIT numbers, I think, 2 years ago. And I guess, is it the same system being employed? You're actually almost a Q&A with a lot of them saying your age, where you're from. Those, to me, are still with me today. And I guess that's more of a question to begin, Andrea. Was that it's the same PIT system to identify?
Yes, they do have those identifiers. I do know that the Human Development Council, leaned on the lived experience table as well when creating the PIT count to have a real have their voice brought to how the survey is conducted. I can speak personally in being involved into what Mark spoke about earlier in going through the PIT counts and seeing some of the information. A lot of individuals not at rent too high, not enough money, which I just stopped reading those questions because it got a little heartfelt.
I think 2 years ago, what remains with me today is the percentage on the mental health and addiction side of the PIT population survey. It was in the high 70s or low 80s, meaning of the present population on our streets, that percentage was identified as people struggling with mental health and addictions, a big number. And it also kind of told us where they're from, which is interesting to know because everybody wants to know where they're coming from. That's the common question around the city for those perhaps giving it a blanket statement or not following is where is everybody coming from? And that PIT at the time kind of broke it down by Maritimes, regions, some from the West, some from Quebec. That was very interesting. So continued success with that, if I could use that word, and it's a very worthwhile effort. Thank you very much, Andrea. Merci, Madame Addis.
Thank you. Councillor Legier.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have 3 questions. I guess the first one having to do with, we're hearing a lot from the business community now with homelessness and what they're seeing and how the perception and some reality of affecting business and so on. So I'm just wondering what role you think the Greater Moncton, your group can play, Homelessness Steering Committee, in liaising maybe with the business community, the chamber and DMCI, and because often things are said that are not necessarily accurate, perhaps, or perhaps that is the reality, but don't have necessarily the background. So I don't know if you have an answer to that question, but it's certainly something that I would ask that the group look at, reaching out to the business community and beginning and maybe continuing a stronger dialogue.
Thank you for the question. I think it's fair to say with any platform of advocation, we need to be considering all angles. So that would definitely be something that we would want to engage with.
Yeah. Okay. I think that is really going to be very important. The second question, and it refers to the Human Development Council's website. So I'm just wondering why the data is several months behind. Like even on the website now, it's only September data, for example. And I'm just wondering what stops, and maybe you don't have an answer, but why wouldn't we be able to have, here we are, in December, within a week or two, reflection of what the situation looked like in November, as opposed to, well, we know what it looked like in September. Any thoughts? Any reason?
For that, actually, I will lean to Louise Marchand, just where that is more of her expertise than I.
Of course. Thank you for the question. So our reporting is done through our HIFIS system, which is our homeless families and individuals information system. So thank you. With HIFIS, it is all of the data that we gather is entirely input by our service providers. So typically, we do have that 1 to 2 week before we will pull our reporting numbers for the month prior. In the case of the reason why the September numbers are still currently on the website compared to our October numbers, we did complete an update of HIFIS to a newer version in the beginning of September. And as a result, there was a change in the way that HIFIS tracks some activity for specific clients. So it meant that some of our numbers for October were more inflated and were not a true reflection. So our HIFIS team has been diligently working to try to resolve those issues. They are working with Housing Infrastructure Community Canada, HIC, who does create the HIFIS program itself and provide the updates. So they're actively working with HIC to resolve those bugs, but in the meantime, that's why there has been a delay with this month. However, typically we would aim to have them sort of within that first 3 weeks of the following month for the numbers previous.
For the previous month, okay.
Exactly.
And just I guess the last question, and it relates back to something that Councillor Kingston mentioned. The ongoing question that we're often asked is where people are from. And there was a perception and some reality a number of years ago where it seemed that we were seeing more and more people on the streets that were not from the community. And that has really held within, for a number of residents. But I know that there have been some success stories where people have been able to return if they were not from our community and provided support services. I know that the government in New Brunswick stepped up and began to offer more services in other communities. And so can you just comment on the reality of what we're seeing on our streets at the moment, or just what it's been maybe in the last several months? Just because what I seem to be seeing is, you know, we would look at southeastern New Brunswick as a catchment. I don't think it's reflective of everyone from everywhere else coming into our community. But I would just like to maybe have your comments on that.
It's a fair and a very good question. I think realistically, it's hard to answer that question without having the results from the point-in-time count, because that really is what details that information. And I know, to Louise's point, we'll have that in February, and we'd be happy to come back and revisit and provide that information to you at that time.
Okay, thank you. Merci.
Thank you. Councillor Steves.
Thank you, Mayor Arnold. It's been a little while since we've had an update, and that's just why we're all asking so many questions. We do care quite a bit. So Andrea, Louise, Vincent, Mark, we appreciate everything you're doing here and all the organizations. I have two questions. The first one I think will be best answered by Mark, and then we'll leave it open for the second one. So Mark, could you come to the mic there for a moment? I know you've certainly tracked with us for a number of years for this council. Winter is upon us. It's going to be minus 18 tonight. I'm just wondering if you could help us out with how confident you are today compared to recent years, which appears to us on council the last few years has been a bit of a panic situation in early December. How confident are you today about this upcoming winter?
Yeah, thank you for that. I would say we feel very confident. And so what a lot of people don't know is we've actually built an annex to the emergency response plan for the city of Moncton, specifically focusing on the homeless serving population. So if it's a fire, a flood, an ice storm, cold weather, we've been, not only have we had a plan, we've been exercising that plan to make sure we're prepared when things happen. We've exercised that last summer during rainstorms, power outages. So, you know, we are prepared from that perspective. I'd also share that from a shelter perspective, we signed our Out of the Cold shelter agreements many months ago. So we knew beds were going to increase. We had a plan to go with that. We were able to stay ahead of it by multiple months. And I can share also, you know, December 1st was that trigger date to increase bed capacity. And it's increasing quite a bit between House of Nazareth, Harvest House, and John Howard Society. But we started filling beds in November. Even before the additional funding kicked in, we were putting people on couches and cots to get them out of the cold. And so we are very proactive as a community to get people off the street. The only lack of confidence we might have is not knowing how many people are still on the street every night that need a bed or that desire to come in and have a bed. And so that's what we're working on now. And that's what our great, you know, YMCA, Reconnect, and different outreach partners do. They go out to the 10 sites, they find out who wants to come inside, how can we help you, let's bring you in and let's give you those supports. I would say from all of the winter responses I've done over the past 6 years, this would be the one that I have the most confidence in. Last year we started that process. This year is the year where we've kind of honed it in and we know exactly what we're doing. We started preparing as a shelter for our increased meal counts. We jumped up to almost 600, 700 meals overnight to accommodate the people coming in to feed. And so we're staying ahead of it every step of the way and working with the provincial government to make sure we have adequate funding to do that. So I'm not sure if that fully answers it, but a lot more confidence than we've had in the past.
Good. Well, it's certainly welcome news compared to other years around this time. My second question, anybody can answer this, is what kind of communication has your organization had with the new government? Has that happened yet? Is it scheduled? Help us with that.
So no, we have not, as of yet, had any communication with the new government. We're actually due tomorrow to have our discovery session for our communications plan as a committee. We feel that it's really important to make sure that we have a strong, unified voice on what our approach is. So we want to make sure that we have that aligned prior to.
If you were to just predict the future, what's the ideal timeline for a meeting? Can you get a meeting? Are you anticipating there will be a meeting?
I would anticipate, yes, that there will be a meeting if I'm speaking from my own lens. When that would be, I lean to the committee to help make those decisions. So it is a committee-made decision, but I would say within the new year of January.
Okay. Thank you for all you're doing.
Councillor Thériault. Oh, excuse me, Deputy Mayor Thériault.
Merci, Madame la maire. Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation et surtout pour votre engagement. On sait tous que ce n'est pas un problème qui est unique à Moncton, on le dit souvent. C'est un problème mondial. Donc, et on sait aussi que les gens qui vivent comme sans-abri, ce ne sont pas des gens qui sont très heureux. J'ai l'impression qu'on est souvent très découragé de la vie. Donc, on ne naît pas avec l'idée qu'on va devenir un sans-abri. Souvent, les gens qui présentent nous mentionnent la prévention. Donc, mais c'est qui s'occupe de la prévention et c'est quoi la prévention dans ce dossier?
That's a very hard question to answer. I think preventative can look different from different lenses. Earlier, I spoke to my own, and that preventative for me means earlier on. If you statistically look at individuals whom are homeless, a large percentage of them have touched the child and youth care system or have exited foster care. So that I can only speak for myself. If you were to ask another individual, that lens of what prevention looks like could mean something different. I think Mark really spoke to it earlier, and Councillor Thériault, you're mentioning it as well. It's a Canadian problem, and it's a housing crisis that we are within, and there's an economic crisis that we're within. So until those are looked at differently, or we make moves forward, we aren't going to be able to prevent.
You mentioned that you're working with 14 organizations, if I understood correctly.
There were 14 organizations that were involved within the PIT count. There are 30 members that are on the GMHSC. I can let you know how many organizations that involves if you're wanting.
My question was, are these organizations working on prevention?
I can't speak on behalf of each organization. I would have to say, personally, I would say yes. I could only really lean on the one organization that's here with us today for what they're doing, but I couldn't speak for all individually.
But prevention has to come from other levels of government and a lot of other partners as well. So I guess my last question is, who is leading that in New Brunswick or in Moncton?
Yeah, just one moment. I'm just going to actually bring up my colleague Louise.
Absolutely. So when it comes to funding, HDC is responsible for delivering the Reaching Home funding, which is the federal level. And within that Reaching Home funding, there are dedicated dollars for both prevention and diversion. It is listed on our website which organization has received those funds, but I believe from memory, I'm fairly certain this is the John Howard Society currently. At the Bridge to Home Hub, there are dedicated staff that work at prevention and diversion. So if any individuals do come to the hub and indicate that they are precariously housed and could potentially be losing their housing, they will be working with those diversion specialists to explore rent bank and any other options that would allow them to continue to keep their housing. I believe beyond Reaching Home funds, my understanding is that many of the organizations do also hold prevention diversion positions, but the extent of those duties, I'm not completely clear.
Merci, I'm really happy. Je suis vraiment très heureuse de voir qu'au moins on parle de prévention, but I think that we really need to focus on other levels of government with prevention. Otherwise, it's a continuum of what we're seeing. So, merci encore. Merci.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrea and Louise and Mark and the whole group. You know, you do wonderful work, very, very wonderful. And sometimes we don't really get to see the results of the success, and there are success stories too, which are great. I just got a few questions. Like, when I retired from policing, I went to work for the school district, and one of the things that I found that as kids got old, closer to aging out of social development in foster homes or where they were put, there was a lot of stress on them. You know, they're looked after right up until, and then they age out and they're on their own. And you know, I think that is something that we as just human beings have to work a little bit harder in trying to understand what they're going through as a young, they're coming to a young adult, and so many other things going on. Like, you know, you think of your own kids and you know how, you know, the stress that they've gone through, and here's a young man or woman that is going to be out, and it's quite. I remember talking to quite a few of them, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. They just really have no plan or how to deal with it. Can you just speak on that for a minute? How many you deal with that are like aging out?
That's not a question, actually, that I would have any stats to. That would be something that I would lean to Youth Impact for, really, where they're the individuals that are very youth-focused. I do know that Harvest House has youth programs as well. I'm not sure, Mark, if you have information that you can bring to light for that as well.
I don't really have to have numbers. It's just that, you know, I just know that that is happening, too. And some of these kids are going out, and they're friends with other kids, and they're kind of like couch surfing, and you know, sometimes they're not caught into that number that we have, like around approximately 500. It could be a lot more than that. That's what I guess maybe that's kind of where I'm getting. The other thing, Andrea, that always bothers me when people come to council is that we still never ever get a definition of affordable housing. We talk, you know, like a couple times when developers are coming, you know, we talk about, you know, the $1,400 to $1,500 a month for affordable housing, but you know, the definition for the city of Moncton, you know, it's different in rural areas and in the city, but you know, you can have a definition, but we have to have a price that goes with these people. I mean, you take two people that are just seniors that only have their only income is their pension. You know, that doesn't really go very far. It's like you were talking about. Do you pay your bill or do you eat, right? So, Louise, I see you up to. Go ahead.
I was going to mention that I guess for me, when you're thinking about affordable housing, a person should not be spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So I think you really need to look at the individual and not necessarily group it into a larger picture. But I would look to Louise for some specifics on that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Human Development Council actually did just release a living wage report, which included a sort of an estimate based on the majority of people within that range and their salary. If it is that 30% that Andrea is talking about, this is from memory, so please don't quote me. That report is available on our HDC website, but from memory, it's in the $800 to $1,200 range is what will be considered 30% of the majority of people's income at that point.
Okay, thank you, Louise. And Andrea, my last question for you is, and you've mentioned a couple times now, is start earlier. And, you know, and I think that the data is probably not being collected the right way. My own self personally from working with the schools is that, you know, we have young people that are getting through school, and some of them, when they get to grade 9 and grade 10, and their ability to read or write is still way below the national level. Education is probably one of the most important and best avenues away from this that I seen when I worked with the school board. And one of the things that I noticed that the kids that were 2 or 3 years academically behind were the ones more apt to drop out of school or maybe just come at the first of the year, but they get their name on the list, but then their attendance is terrible. And and when you have free time, it's like my poor grandmother used to say about boys. Anyways, if you put one boy in a room, you got a full brain. You put two, you get half a brain. Three or more, you got no brain at all. So when these kids are out there on their own and they're not being supervised, I think you're absolutely right. But I think all across this province, the school boards have to work together to try to figure out, like, how do we deal with these kids that are going into grade 7, 8, and 9 and can't read or write? I think it's so important, for the future, for the homeless.
I heard a lot of great statements, but I'm not exactly sure what the question is,
Well, the
Councillor
question
Butler.
is, should we be, at the very beginning, I was asking about data. When we're talking about homelessness, if this is one of the causes, if this is one of the signs early, it's like bullying in school, kids getting bullied, should we not have some type of a database that and what the red flag should be? So in other words, if the school, it could be from, you could be from Harcourt going to school, or you could be from, Quispam-Sis, but the same things happen. The kids are dropping out of school, or their ability to read or write are down. So there's got to be some way that we have some type of a data, not us, but this is provincial for sure, but I hate saying it's someone else's problem. We end up, everybody as humans, dealing with this. So I'm just wondering, is there anything on the horizon to see that we could maybe get more, statistics is going to help us also?
100%. You can always have a good story, but the data helps validate that story. I would never want to speak on behalf of the school board. The school board does great work.
They do.
I do know that our province as a whole and our community as Moncton is looking at, and has been over the past year, concentrated a little bit more so on the importance of youth data, and getting the organizations that are working with that more familiar with the platform of HIFIS that Louise mentioned earlier. So we are doing a better job at collecting it, yes.
Should we be talking to the Anglophone and the Francophone decks and to find out, is there something we can do to work together? Instead of in silos, if you have some data that there's certain kids that are starting to show the red flag, should we not somebody should be dealing with that now instead of when they get to be 19 or 20 and then they're back, and then we're dealing with the after effects of no education?
I think any conversation is a good conversation, so I would welcome a conversation, as I'm sure the committee would, with the districts, and districts both.
Yeah, both.
I can speak to that there are programs in place now within certain Anglophone schools and some of the Francophone SUD that do help support youth. But it's the data piece and finding better ways as a community to really supporting those youth to the appropriate entities within community where that can be collected.
Thank you for all you do and for the whole group. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
All right. I don't see any other questions, but I'd like to thank you very much, Andrea, for being here tonight and taking the time to give us this update. And to Louise, we're really happy that HDC finally has a real presence in Moncton. And Mark, thank you for giving us an update, a hopeful update, I would say, on some of the progress that has been made in our community over the last year. I have had a very brief opportunity to meet with Minister Cindy Miles, Social Development Minister, and her background is youth mental health, and she has a real heart for this work. So I think that bodes well for the future. And I'm just going to give a stat that I give whenever I have an audience around this, because I think it goes a long way to explaining what we're seeing. In 1974, 50 years ago, 20% of all housing in our nation was either non-market or social housing. And today, it is less than 4%. The cure for homelessness is housing. So we need to make sure that in everything that we're doing, we're moving ahead on that. For sure with supports in some cases, but this is very much housing. And I mean housing along the whole spectrum of housing, but this is a housing crisis that we are experiencing right now. So thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. Merci.
Thank you.
Your Worship, our next presentation is Administration Presentations, Exposé de l'Administration. And there is one before us today. It's a presentation of the International Economic Development Council 2024 Excellence Award. And I see Luc Babineau, our Interim Director of Economic Development, is here to take us through this item.
Your Worship and Member of Council, it's my honor this evening to provide an overview of the International Economic Development Council IEDC 2024 Excellence Award to the City of Moncton. J'ai le plaisir de vous présenter et accueillir au Conseil Claire Burnett. Claire is the Director of Business Growth Services for the City of Toronto's Economic Development, and here to present the award to the City of Moncton on behalf of the IEDC as the Canadian rep for that organization. So we're very fortunate and lucky to have you here this evening. The City of Moncton Economic Development Department completed a submission for the Excellence Award in the category of Real Estate Development and Reuse. The submission focused on growth in the downtown Moncton following the opening of the Avenir Centre. So some of the highlights that were submitted included a target of the $108 million in new downtown tax base by 2023. And the outcome was exceeded by delivering $192 million of new downtown tax base. And another fun fact, $333 million in new downtown building permits were issued from 2017 to 2023. And the construction of more than 1,000 new downtown residential units as well. So as a reminder, and to put a little bit of context to this award, the Avenir Centre was built and opened in the late 2018, and to offset the borrowing costs and contribution for other level of government, the city aimed to achieve $108 million in new downtown assessment by 2023. I'm looking at Kevin, I can recall that exact day then when we received that news of that goal. And we're here tonight. So the responsibility of achieving this objective fell on the Economic Development Department, but it was also a city, obviously, goal. The Economic Development team really embarked on an extensive outreach and relationship management initiative, and really to go meet all the high-impact properties, all the underutilized heritage buildings as well, vacant lots in the downtown area. We started by the core and then quickly expand in the CBD and BIA area. And that was over 4 years. So from starting projects, some of them completed, some of them are still in planning stage as of this year. Avant l'implantation de l'initiative, la croissance et les investissements au centre-ville étaient en déclin. The annual building permit for the downtown were as low as $6 million, reaching a peak of $20 million for some years. And that was leading the Avenir Centre construction. So on average, that was $13.6 million annually in downtown building permits. So the good news, and why we're here tonight, is in 2023, the downtown building permit reached a total of $66.5 million, and with $39.2 million in 2022. So and I did mention, obviously, through those years, $333 million, averaging $55.6 million per year. So that is the achievement for this award. And obviously, basically, this was quadrupling the results that we were seeing in the building permits. I also want to take this opportunity to, this was a reflection as well for our team, because there is a lot of hard work that was put as city staff. And obviously, I do want to thank the broader group and all the participants that made this achievement possible. J'aimerais remercier la mairesse and elected officials, le Comité de la conservation du patrimoine, city administration, leadership, mes collègues, economic development team, some that are here today, Kevin Siliker's leadership now in the role of GM of Corporate Services, and Hélène Aucoin, General Manager of Sustainable Growth and Development Services, and her entire team as well, and also the business sector. So this includes builders, developers, investors, commercial lenders, and also the real estate industry. So many hands have helped build and create the right environment. Comme vous pouvez le constater, il y a beaucoup de gens et de groupes qui font partie de l'écosystème. Alors, nous sommes reconnaissants. And now I will present and welcome Claire Barnett to continue the presentation and do the physical presentation award. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you very much for inviting me to come here today to present this very important award. I'm extending my congratulations personally, but also on behalf of the board of IEDC, as well as its chair, president, and CEO of IEDC, Nathan Oley, and the awards committee, who was extremely impressed with this submission, with its content, as well as with the passion that it could see within that award. We are specifically speaking about the Gold Award for IEDC 2024 Excellence Award in Real Estate Development and Reuse category. And this award really recognizes the city's outstanding achievements in fostering economic growth and revitalization. The panel of 8 independent judges praised Moncton's efforts, emphasizing the city's strategic approach and its transformational impact on development projects, which you heard about just a few minutes ago. The notes from some of the judges really highlighted the collaboration with the private sector, which is critical in economic development, as you know, but also across industries and sectors. And really what I have found this afternoon is a once-in-a-generational change for the economic development of the downtown. A bit about the International Economic Development Council. It is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan membership organization based in Washington, D.C., serving economic development developers around the world. It has more than 4,500 members, and it is the largest organization of its kind. I personally have several roles with IEDC. We just launched a Canadian pilot, a pilot program for ambassadors in Canada. There's myself based in Toronto, as well as someone based in Quebec, to really do outreach about IEDC across the country to try and raise the profession, the profile of the profession, and the ethics of the profession. I'm also a board member and the chair of the International Advisory Committee. And what this role allows me to do is really place professional development within economic development across the country. When I was with the city of Brampton, we really utilized all the programming available, and so I really encourage the team here to look at what is possible. That includes certification. That also includes accreditation of economic development departments. In Brampton, we also were the first Canadian city to have a diversity mentorship and fellowship program with IEDC, and mentorship for younger generations who want to grow their careers in economic development. It really also focuses on advancing and guiding the ethics of the profession, which is unique in economic development organizations in the world, and that's personally very important to me. But also I wanted to highlight sharing best practices. And the conversation that you just had about housing, Moncton is certainly not alone. It is about attainable and affordable housing. It is a housing crisis. We hear that in Toronto Council every time, every day. We see that in the province of Ontario from the provincial leadership, from the Premier as well. But we're also seeing that in the United States. So when I was just at one of the annual conferences, and they did a poll of the economic development directors to see what were some of the challenges for economic development, number 1 was housing. So a membership and engagement with IEDC will really help your economic development team move that forward. On a more positive note, I am here to present the award formally and officially to you. I'd like to congratulate you, and I hope that you keep up the great work. And I'm very happy to come back again. It's a beautiful city. And I welcome you to visit me in Toronto as well. Thank you.
The next, we have no planning matters this evening. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Butler, did you wish to speak?
No, I was just waiting for, I thought it was statements.
Oh, sorry. Are we there?
Nope, not yet.
Not yet.
Fair enough.
Shortly. There are no planning matters this evening. Il n'y a pas de question d'urbanisme ce soir. Now, Councillor Butler, we are.
Go ahead, Councillor
Too fast
Butler.
with that finger. Well, I'm just too fast with that finger. So just a couple things that I'd like to say is that I attended last night to the Everett Senior Curling Championships at Curl Moncton. Absolutely amazing. The crowd that was there to see such that club being used the way it was last night. There's a team from every province has a team in every territory. Ontario has two, Northern and Southern Ontario. They're a big province, right? So what a fantastic world-class curling. If you're into curling, great to drop by. It's going on all week. That's what that one. The second one thing I'd like to say is that this will be our last public meeting beforehand, so I'd like to get it in. On December the 13th, this year at 11 a.m. at Boar Park, we will be having a memorial service for the Moncton Police Force officers that have died in the line of duty. Just a little upbeat on that is that on the statement is number one is Joseph Stedman. He was killed in the line of duty on August 1st, 1892, right in behind us at Queen and Lewis. I was shot in the chest while trying to stop a suspect from a break and enter. This will be the 50th year memorial service for Corporal Aurel Bourgeois and Constable Michael Larry, who passed away 50 years ago on December 13th. That's why we're having it that date. And also, 50 years ago was on a Friday, and this year it's also on a Friday. So I would like for anybody from council or from the city or from the residents that would like to drop by. It's going to be a short service, but we want to remember them for sure. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Bourgeois, go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Over the past decade, notably since COVID, the number of immigrants moving to Moncton has increased significantly. This provides multiple challenges, notably overcrowded schools and hospitals and a housing crisis. But immigrants enrich our lives by bringing economic growth and new perspectives on local issues. Our local organizations like Magma, CAFI, and Moncton Cares, as well as the many facilitating groups like the Associazione Italiana di Moncton, have done a great job in greeting and integrating newcomers, especially visible minorities. The city has funded many of these groups. It also has a social inclusion committee that, among other things, works with other groups in the city to fight racism. However, I feel more should be done, at least over the next decade, then we can reassess. Council should reach out to immigrants to find out if we can do more or better. And if so, what specifically we could do to better greet and integrate immigrants. Now, we could conduct a survey or focus groups or use our Let's Chat Moncton website. But that is not enough, and it means that we drive the initiative and immigrants react. We need to give them a voice, their voice. Gather them up and let them recommend to us. I therefore propose we establish an advisory committee on multiculturalism. We should invite each of the interested ethnicities, races, cultures to appoint a member and let these members consult their colleagues to inform council of their needs. I think together we can make a difference and avoid any negative pitfalls and take advantage of integration both ways. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Next up, Councillor Legier.
Merci
Voilà.
beaucoup.
Sorry.
Je voulais tout simplement exprimer un grand merci au comité de planification pour notre parade annuelle du Père Noël. Et je voulais en particulier remercier les volontaires, remercier le personnel, tous ceux qui ont créé un événement hier qui était super spécial. So yesterday, in light of the Santa Claus parade being canceled, and that was a very difficult decision taken by the parade committee, the static Santa Claus parade was held in the parking lot of the Coliseum. There were over 20,000 people that went through the gates last night. It was amazing in terms of even just the logistics behind that. So a lot of the stuff that people don't see is all of the things that needed to happen to assure the floats were there, the personnel was there, the volunteers were there, staff did a tremendous job, and the volunteers. So it's a tremendous, I think, way to have captured so many smiles from kids. They were so excited. And in fact, they actually got to walk up and see the floats close up and see all of the moving parts on the Santa Claus Mr. Claus float and the Mrs. Claus float. It was really quite interesting to see, and perhaps maybe that's something that we might be able to do in future years in a small scale for those who, and maybe prolong that type of spirit. But in any event, it certainly was a success, and I want to thank everyone because it didn't go. It took a long time to try to pull. It took a very short time to pull that together, but it was certainly a lot of coordination from the RCMP to fire, all the special services that were there. So anyway, just want to say a huge thank you, and I certainly was pleased to see so many smiling children from all nationalities, and I think it really does show the diverse population that we have in our community, and how much this has really been so successful with our growth as we have received that Economic Development Award this evening. So, merci. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights on. I think we're good to move on the agenda.
The next item is reports and recommendations from committees and private meetings. Rapport et recommandations des comités et réunions à huis clos. Ce soir, c'est une recommandation du comité plénier le 25 novembre 2024. And before you this evening, Council, is a motion that Moncton City Council approve the strategic plan pillars, including vision, mission, and goals for each pillar. And I believe that our Deputy CAO is going to provide a PowerPoint presentation to this.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. So we've already gone through this document at the previous committee of the whole meeting. At that meeting, Council requested a few changes to it. So I just wanted to briefly highlight those changes. I'm not going to go through the whole document again. First up was under environment, and there was a request to include reference to other forms of air pollution, for example, noise, odor. So we've done that under the first goal, as you can see there. So the actual goal is reduce net greenhouse gas emissions and other forms of air pollution. And then below that, one of the final descriptive bullet talks about mitigating other forms of pollution, for example, noise, odor, dust. So we've tried to address Council's concern there. Et aussi, pour la gouvernance, nous avons ajouté le mot démocratique dans la vision. Donc maintenant, c'est une collectivité engagée et démocratique. And besides that, really, there haven't been any other changes. We removed a few kind of repetitive words under that first grouping for the greenhouse gas emissions, just because now with 4 bullets, it's a bit longer. So we tried to just shorten it up and remove any unnecessary wording. We also had the translation reviewed also. So I think this addresses council's concerns, but if there are any other questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Nick. I would like to get a mover and seconder for this. Thank you, Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Kingston. We're going to go to a screen so you can do that officially. I think.
It works, I swear it works.
Is it working? No? Oh, there we go. Okay. So the mover and seconder, I would ask that you indicate that. Awesome. Oh, yes, done. Okay, so we will, any questions? I see Councillor Bourgeois, go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Maire. Merci pour les modifications, Nick. I'm just wondering whether or not we should not have a bullet somewhere below the mission or in one of the boxes that says something like encourage citizens to seek election and vote. Something to that effect. In other words, it's nice to say we are a democratic, or what's it called, an engaged and democratic community. But if that is a strategic plan, if we have initiatives to that end, I don't see any. So could we add something like encourage citizens to seek election and vote?
I mean, certainly if that's council's will, we could include something. We have, you mean the second broad goal that we have is increase and diversify stakeholder collaboration and resident engagement. So if you think one of those kind of descriptive bullets below that should be related to that item, we could certainly add language to that effect if that's what council wants.
And I'll take the blame for it because last time I was focusing more on having democratic included in the picture somewhere, and it was discussed previously, but it wasn't there, so now it's there. But then it got me thinking that maybe we should have something specific within one of the boxes. So I'll make the amendment, see what council says about it. Otherwise, to me, the document is excellent.
What is that amendment specifically?
That we include somewhere in the boxes, if you say second one, diversify stakeholder collaboration, not really there, but maybe a well-managed, democratic and responsible organization, and the third bullet would be encourage citizens to seek election and vote.
Could it possibly be in the second pillar, first bullet, added onto that one? Implement innovative and effective public engagement strategies and tools to engage more residents to vote, become involved in the process, something like that even?
As long as it's included, I'm flexible. As long as we are committed in our strategic plan to increase the voter turnout, that is abysmal at 33%.
So is there a seconder for that? I don't see one at this time. Okay, Councillor Terrio, okay. Any discussion? Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, we've talked about this before, and I agree with Councillor Bourgeois in regards to trying to get people more involved in voting. But when we talked about this last time, at the very top it says to lead by encouraging innovation, participation, transparency, and accountability in our decision making. So I kind of see that as that part. And also with the second bullet in there about the public engagement strategies and tools to engage more residents. I looked at that also, and my opinion is that we've covered that. I think every time we can come here, we can add something. I don't disagree with Councillor Bourgeois, but I think it's in there. And if we keep adding, it'll kind of fade away into. I think that everybody on council kind of knows what what we're trying to get here, to have the finished product. And, you know, it's a thing that we all have to work on if we want more people to run for council and also to vote. You know, it's a democracy is, you know, you want to vote or you don't. So, you know, but anyway, I think it's covered. Thank you.
If that is the understanding, that engage more residents implies that we engage them mostly to run and mostly to vote, I'll withdraw my motion.
All right, Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. And what we're voting on here are the pillars. So doesn't mean that what Councillor Bourgeois is talking about would not be added to the strategic plan. It could be in there. It's that a request that council can make, that those kind of discussions happen in that document.
So what council is voting on tonight are those kind of pillar documents that you have before you in your package. Once we have this approved, then administration will go back, formulate work plans, measurable objectives that we can bring back to council. And then, you know, and even below that, administration, we all have kind of our day-to-day operations and things that we have to work on also. And we have discussed this very topic, actually, that is something that staff are working on actively, so.
So whether it goes through or not, I believe he withdrew his motion. This discussion will still happen or can still happen, right?
Exactly.
So I feel better with that. Merci beaucoup.
I think we're ready to vote. If we could bring up the voting page. He has withdrawn his motion.
One nay vote, Susan Edgett.
There's also, Councillor
Yeah.
LeBlanc, there's something weird going on. Why are people that don't vote included in this?
Yeah. Second, let's start. We're not really sure. I was asking the very same question as to why. But let's try this again.
So we're going to do the vote over? Okay.
We'll probably see the same names, but we're not sure why.
Okay, let's try that again. Yes, please. That's, yeah.
Ignore them.
We're just going to ignore the other names there. So I think that all of council has now voted. And
Only one nay vote.
one nay vote, Councillor Edgett, so the motion passes.
Thank you.
Next would be reports from administration, and the first one this evening is the additional Remini Street Information System support. And the motion before council this evening is that Moncton City Council authorize administration to enter into a 3-year contract with Remini Street Consulting, Inc. in the amount of $196,122 plus HST at 15% for the provision of specialty connection services for email and browsers to support the existing ERP system, and that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign all related contract documentation and affix the corporate seal thereto. And
Oops, is there someone who wishes to move this? Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Kingston. I would ask that you move and second, if you could. Thank you. No, that's fine in this case. Okay, on the discussion, Councillor Bourgeois.
I think it's a typo, but at the end of line 3, it says to support the existing ERP system. Probably there's a missing and.
Yeah.
that the mayor and city
Yeah.
clerk be authorized to sign all related contract documentation and affix the corporate seal there too.
Yes.
Merci.
We're ready for-
Any other questions? I think we can move to the vote.
Come on, Betty. There you go. Everybody, Councillor Edgett? Madame Adjointe n'est pas ici.
Is the deputy mayor not here? No, okay. I think that's everyone. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
The next item is the notice of motion that was brought forth by Councillor Bourgeois. I believe that administration may have something on this, and Councillor Bourgeois, you can read your motion.
So which comes first? Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, maybe I'll just quickly introduce the CRF. So this report form was drafted by administration in response to the notice of motion by Councillor Bourgeois relating to the residential parking program. So as you can see from the council report form, administration was already planning to review this entire bylaw, which is something that we would be doing next year, and we would plan to have that done by June 2025 to bring a draft bylaw forward for council's approval. So that would be administration's recommendation. So the recommendation before you in the CRF, as we've done for previous notices of motion, the actual recommendation is the notice of motion by Councillor Bourgeois. Administration's recommendation would be the alternative below, which would be to allow administration the opportunity to review the entire bylaw, taking into account Councillor Bourgeois' request and any other issues that we've kind of identified with the current residential parking program, and allow us to bring those recommended changes, everything together, after we've been able to do a kind of a fulsome review of the bylaw. But I'll turn it over to Councillor Bourgeois if he has any additional comments that he'd like to make. It is his notice of motion, and we do have staff here who can answer any questions that the council may have about the residential parking bylaw or program.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la maire. Est-ce que, Shelley, on a la photo disponible?
Pour la motion de... Oui.
Oui. Je t'avais envoyé une photo ce matin. Je peux continuer quand même. J'apprécie beaucoup l'avis, conseil du personnel. Je suis d'accord. Vous devriez faire la révision en 2025 comme bon vous semble, puis revenir au conseil avec l'ensemble. Le problème, c'est qu'est-ce qui arrive avec ces pauvres citoyens-là qui sont pris dans un dilemme. Ce n'est pas leur faute, mais ils se retrouvent dans un dilemme. Ils habitent dans une maison, je n'ai pas la photo encore, ils habitent dans une maison qui n'a pas de driveway, qui n'a pas de cour. Donc, ils n'ont pas d'autre choix, puis ça, c'est une maison, c'est un duplex. Donc, ils n'ont pas d'autre choix que de stationner sur la rue. OK? Normalement, pas de problème. Mais là, sur la rue, il y a un empêchement, la rue Dufferin, de stationner, je crois que c'est de 10 à 11. Fait, j'essaie d'imaginer les pauvres qui travaillent au centre-ville, s'ils sont chanceux de travailler au centre-ville, qui doivent revenir le matin avant 10 heures pour conduire leur voiture en quelque part pour 1 heure, aller retourner au travail, revenir par après, puis là, ils peuvent retourner stationner sur la rue. Ça ne fait pas de sens. La Ville, dans le passé, a permis la construction ou l'aménagement de cette maison-là à 129-131 Dufferin sans driveway, sans parcours. Ça ne fait pas de sens. Ça fait on a une accumulation de choses qui ne font pas de sens puis qui donnent des locataires dans 129 puis 131 qui n'ont pas de place à stationner. Il y a pas d'espace suffisant entre la maison et le trottoir pour construire des places à stationner. Il n'y a même pas 10 pieds, je pense, entre la maison et le trottoir. Fait, ils n'ont pas d'option, ils n'ont pas d'alternative. Je ne connais pas, ça fait depuis 2008 que je siège au conseil, je n'ai jamais entendu parler d'un cas comme ça, d'une maison qui n'avait pas de driveway. Il y en a peut-être d'autres. Je m'imagine pas qu'il y en a 250 puis que ça va chambarder le service de bylaw pour émettre des permis. Je pense qu'on quelque chose qui aurait dû être traité de façon simple, facile, pas capable à cause que l'arrêté ne le permet pas. Donc, on n'a pas d'autre choix que de permettre, si on veut faire des permis, de modifier l'arrêté. C'est pas mal compliqué ce qu'on est en train de faire là, mais c'est la seule façon. S'il y a quelqu'un qui a une meilleure solution, moi, je suis prêt à l'écouter. C'est pas, j'insiste pas sur l'arrêté ou la modification de l'arrêté. Ce que j'insiste, c'est qu'on utilise le common sense, puis qu'on est capable de permettre à ces personnes-là d'avoir au moins des permis pour une voiture pour chacune, une voiture pour 129 puis une voiture pour 131 Dufferin, qui peuvent stationner là de 10 à 11 le matin, contrairement à l'arrêté, un autre arrêté en quelque part qui interdit le stationnement. On les a mis dans un piège, puis ils sont malheureux, ils se plaignent, ils essayent de trouver des solutions, puis autre que de payer des stationnements à gauche et à droite, 99,9% des autres citoyens de la ville ont accès à des stationnements. Il y en a peut-être pas assez. Il y en a peut-être qui auraient aimé d'avoir 2 voitures dans le stationnement, puis on empêche ça. Ça, c'est un autre cas. Ici, on a un cas exceptionnel, très exceptionnel. Je ne sais pas s'il y en a d'autres dans la ville, puisqu'il y a une maison qui n'a pas de driveway. Alors, c'est quoi la solution? Ben, c'est facile. Permis pour une voiture par unité. Donc, je propose, je ne sais pas si tu as besoin la motion est déjà là, je la proposerai de nouveau. Puis j'ai hâte de voir le conseil qui me donne des alternatives à ces personnes-là, à nos citoyens, les citoyens qu'on dessert. On est élus par les citoyens pour les desservir. Je suis prêt à accueillir des alternatives, mais sinon, je souhaite que les gens vont voter pour, mais je suis prêt à répondre à la question de tout membre du conseil qui en aurait. Merci, Madame la maire.
Thank you. Councillor Edgett.
Thank you, Your Worship. So is there a motion on the floor?
Oh, sorry. No, there is no motion on the floor. Is there
Just did.
someone who wishes to,
I just did, if you want me to reread it, I'll reread it, otherwise
Sure,
I've just
reread
made
it.
the motion.
You could read the motion, please.
OK. En français, il est résolu que l'arrêté L722 soit modifié pour permettre l'émission de permis aux résidents qui sont dans l'impossibilité de stationner sur le lot qu'ils appartiennent ou occupent, de stationner sur la rue en tout temps, sauf lors d'une interdiction spécifique, notamment pour le déblayage de la neige.
And I believe, Councillor Richard, you had hoped to second to that? Okay. Over to you, Councillor Edgett. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Therefore, with that motion, I will be voting against it. I normally don't respond to actions that are hasty in any way. Maybe have in the past regrettably, but try not to. And also, I'm reading here, amending residential parking bylaw to allow the issuance of on-street parking permits to residents who do not have access to a parking space on the lot they own or rent may lead to an increase in demand for permits from residents in other situations. Residents who do not have enough space in their driveway, for example, for all their vehicles, may demand similar expectations. Similarly, developers may also end up not providing parking on site or reducing their parking offer with the expectation that on-street parking will be provided and guaranteed through a new bylaw. Implementing any changes to the residential parking bylaw without completing a comprehensive review and analysis as proposed by the statement from our staff may lead to unforeseen effects and issues for the city. So for those reasons, I I don't know if there's some other way to address an individual situation, but I don't think it's by changing our bylaws at this time until we've gone through the proper process to study the changes and make sure of all the consequences of those changes for those other parking situations. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
I do agree with Councillor Bourgeois that, you know, when people buy a home and they find out after they buy it that when they park their vehicle between certain times that they're going to get a ticket. But, you know, he used a phrase that I just love. It's called common sense. I agree that we could probably wait till 2025 to get this done. But at the same time, I think Councillor Bourgeois, and I don't want to speak for him, but I would think that, you know, that when bylaw are out giving tickets, that, you know, common sense would apply that if there's an address that they know that they pass on from their director, Mr. Preston, that this is an issue that came up to council. You know, Councillor Edgett's talking, you know, about not changing, but, you know, as council, that's what our job is, to help residents when they come to us. That's what we're here for. And somebody has contacted Councillor Bourgeois, and they're having issues that they're getting parking tickets. And, you know, when that happens, then we have to step in. And I believe that the common sense approach to this would be, I agree with staff also, that, listen, we have to make sure that we do this right. But at the same time, there's only 2 houses that have approached. If they haven't approached and they got no problem, then we don't have to worry about it. But when people approach, I think it's common sense that we look at it. Just look at it and see. So if I took a drive by there, and I know the area very well, and there is no driveway. There is no place you can put a driveway. It's just not possible. Now, these people live there, and all they're asking for is for somebody to say, hey, listen, I can park my vehicle in front. I'm sure they'd have to move it if there's snowing, but, you know, this is not rocket science. This is just common sense approach. Thank you.
Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Yeah, no, I agree the same thing. I mean, I guess it's in a way to change the whole bylaw for these residents, but I mean, right now they don't have any other options. If you look on those pictures that are up there, the gray building is the one that we're talking about. So on the left-hand picture, the parked truck on the right-hand side is to the building to the right-hand side. It doesn't go with the gray building. And then the picture on the right, that driveway going in between the two is for the left-hand side building. So that property has no way. It's basically what they call landlocked as well. If he wants to get to the back of his property, he can't. Have to come in by helicopter. So I think this really fits well for these individuals, and I'm sure if there are any others in the city, they would appreciate the same kind of help. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. CAO, Serge, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I think that from an administration perspective, I think that we'd be more than willing to work with the resident to find a solution, an interim solution, as we find the longer-term solution with the reviewing the bylaw. So regardless if it's on-site or other options, but we will work with the resident to find that solution.
So you're suggesting that administration will find a solution for these 2 homeowners so that we don't need to make a change to the bylaw at this time until it comes forward after a full and due course? Is that what I'm hearing? Yes. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Legier.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it makes sense in terms of, it should be relatively easy that we do this. I think the problem that we may face is this particular area, like areas around the hospital and so on, all have designated parking except for between 10 and 11 o'clock. And the reason for that was because of residents indicating the difficulty that they were having being able to park on the street because people were parking on the street and then they were walking to work. And so I understand the complexity of this. However, to think that we're not going to see others and that it's not going to be in demand, I'm not sure. We need a structured approach for distributing parking passes. We've talked about that for the 2 areas around the hospitals. And it is good that, we will have something in 2025. Whether or not the city goes to a program such as Montreal, they have parking permits, for example, but people pay for their parking permits. And so, the question of why someone doesn't have a driveway and all of that stuff is certainly interesting to find out what the details are. But I think we have to be careful on how we approach something. And so, in the past, when we've made decisions, sometimes we've stepped back and said, we would have been best if we would have understood all of the circumstances. So I would feel more comfortable having a policy, trying to figure out what it means to all of those areas. Are there other areas where, for whatever reason, the driveway may be too narrow for them to park their large vehicle, for example, and so therefore, how many permits would we issue? Do we have the staff to be able to issue the permits? All of that stuff. So, if I don't know what the solution can be. I know that other people in our city pay for parking. They rent, but they have to rent a parking space somewhere else because they don't have parking. And so I think, we have to look at that and put it in perspective. So anyway, I wouldn't support it the way it is. I feel that we need to go down the road of making sure that we have a clear understanding of all of the individuals who would like parking permits. Because if you live around the hospital right now, you'd love to have a parking permit to be able to park so you don't have to move your car between 10 and 11. And so it should be fair to them as much as it's fair to this individual. So that's my feeling, that we should stick to doing things in an organized way. And so I feel that at this point, that would be the best approach to come back with a clear policy and a clear direction on how we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who has not spoken on this item who wishes to weigh in? Councillor Kingston, go ahead.
Thank you, Madame Adès, and thank you for that. Now, it's important that to point out that our CEO's comment of a while ago regarding to work with the homeowner in this particular case. They're not probably numerous, but in the case of 129, 131 Dufferin, if we're going to commit to working with the homeowners on this exception, then I'll support that as well. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Anyone else who has not chimed in? I would go back to you, Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la maire. Je vais répondre au conseiller Légère, puis après ça, j'aurai une question pour le gérant. I know that the hospital, City Hospital, raised similar issues. So I did what I thought any councillor would do in that situation, which is drive around the hospital area. And I could not find a single house in the hospital area that doesn't have a driveway. Again, this is an exceptional case. I don't know if there's any other city, but definitely not around the hospital. So the same logic does not apply at all. It just doesn't make sense. But anyways, maintenant c'est le gérant. J'apprécie l'offre de travailler avec le propriétaire puis les locataires. This is what I did in the beginning. I sent an email to staff asking, is there any possibility of fixing this problem? Staff discussed, came back to me, no, not really, because the bylaw doesn't allow something like this. I'm sorry, because I am livid for having wasted a lot of my time writing a resolution that could have been resolved that way. But on the other hand, I'm happy if we can find a solution informally. But what's the point that staff would say, no, sorry, we can't move, and basically the only recourse I had was to draft this resolution for council to modify the bylaw because I was told basically that that's the only solution. And now I'm told 2 months later, and we could have been discussing this with the owner and the renters 2 months ago. And instead, I have no problem in removing the motion from the floor after wasting so much of my time doing this. As long as we get a solution, I don't know if you can guarantee a solution to council. If not, I'd rather stick to the motion and adopt it. And if you can find a solution instead of permits, I'll give you that flexibility, that discretion. If at least council can say, we disagree with the situation that these tenants face, it's exceptional. It doesn't even compare to the hospital argument. But we'll try to find a solution. If not the permits, something else. I can modify the motion to say permits or other solutions. I'm okay, I'm open with that. But I will not take a gamble with my citizens who are in this situation. I'd rather have the motion and tweak it a little bit to give you more discretion than issuing permits than to scrap all of the work that I've done with the owner trying to resolve this situation through staff who told me basically to modify the bylaw. And then when we're here to modify the bylaw, no, that's okay, we can find a solution. So if you want me to tweak the motion, I'll tweak the motion. But I want to guarantee that we will find a solution.
I'd like to hand it over to our CAO then. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Conseiller Bourgeois. I think that once we started digging into this from staff's perspective, found how complicated it was and what kind of possible, how should I say, repercussions of such a decision would make, as indicated in the CRF. And I think that the commitment from staff to review the bylaw to be able to address some of those things on a permanent basis is what we would like to recommend. For this one instance, I assume, and exchanging with staff, we should be able to find a solution, a guaranteed solution. I assume that we can, looking at staff, to try to address this one situation as we review the bylaw for a more permanent solution for the residents of Moncton as a whole. So at this point in time, I guess that's the response that I would have, that as we started looking into the request, the complicated nature of different areas was what was brought up. And I think that Jeff would like to speak to that as well.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think we'd say we'd try to resolve this situation on an interim basis until such time as we can come back with recommendations to changes to the bylaw. That would be permanent solution potential to it.
Well, that's what I understood from the beginning. This is a specific case, let's deal with it. And then from my statement initially was, go ahead, modify it, come back to us next summer for the whole, consider this within the package and everything else. But in the meantime, what do we do with these two cases? If everybody agrees, I don't need to modify the bylaw. I don't want to come back and this better be done before Christmas. This is snow removal is one thing. They understand that they cannot park on the street if we have the alert to clear the street. But on a regular basis, if it's not permits, that's what I'm suggesting. If you have a better idea, that's fine. Now, do you want to go through the motion with council? I have no problem with that. I think common sense will prevail there as well, and we'll be in this situation. But there are councillors like Edgett and Legere who disagree, and that's fine. Maybe the majority will disagree, and we're discussing for nothing. But I can withdraw the motion if there is a commitment, a directive to the city manager to find a solution. I'm fine with that as well. Doesn't matter to me.
Mr. City Manager, can you confirm?
I do confirm we'll find an interim solution for that one individual, and then we will work with administration on reviewing the bylaw.
Just to make sure there's two units.
Yeah, both units of
Okay,
property.
thank you. I'm fine. I'll withdraw the motion if Councillor Richard has no objection to it. Okay.
Awesome.
Merci.
Moving on.
The next is a Housing Accelerator Fund nonprofit development grant program, and the motion before council is that Moncton City Council amend the following policy, having an effective date of December 2nd, 2024, affordable housing half nonprofit development grant program, and notwithstanding the amended grant policy, the program will be retroactively applied to the Housing for Life Inc. Grant application. I believe that Josh Davies is here to provide a PowerPoint presentation.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So before you tonight is a proposed amendment to the Housing Accelerator Fund's nonprofit development grant program. This is one of several grant programs that were approved around this time last year through the announcement and the execution of the contribution agreement between the city and CMHC. So the purpose of this presentation and the amendment is to present to council the proposed amendment to the Affordable Housing Half Nonprofit Development Grant Program policy. And a bit of background. So as part of this contribution agreement that the city holds with CMHC, the city is committed to a housing supply growth target of 2,529 permitted housing units over the 3-year half term. This overall commitment includes a breakdown of the following. So 1,237 missing middle housing units, which could constitute anything between a 2-door unit to a 4-story building. 1,072 other multiple units, so looking there at your higher density 5 stories and above units. And finally, 3% of that supply being affordable housing, which totals 76 housing units. In looking at the math, you may wonder why it doesn't add up to that 2,529 units. It's due to the fact that that would be made up by single dwelling units and other types of housing that would be considered other with respect to these 3 categories. So in terms of our review, we have a review committee in terms of grants that working between planning, finance, economic development, and social inclusion, depending on the grant program that we're working with. And what we've done and what we'll be presenting to council in the near future is our annual report that we will be providing to CMHC in the next week or so. So once that is finalized, we'll be able to come to council with an overall review of how year 1 of the Housing Accelerator Fund went. But the aim of this program specifically, the nonprofit grant program, is to incentivize 100 affordable housing units. And I had seen the question about the affordable component in an earlier presentation, and what the city has done in this approach is to kind of tie affordable to nonprofits. So the nonprofits do a really good job of managing their respective clienteles and have a really good idea of what they can and cannot afford. So we really rely on them to sort of set that affordable rate. And the nonprofit program is specific to those groups. So it's not a program where market developers can tap into. So it kind of narrows the field in terms of who can and who can't apply. Today, the grant program is currently capped at 10 incentivized units, or $200,000. And to date, we have received 2 applications for this program. So unlike other grant programs that we have, a lot of the other grant programs, they're first come, first serve. We're into year 2, 3, and in some cases, year 4 of funding. So it's really great news. But in review of our grant programs, this was one that had been somewhat stalling until very recently, where we did get those 2 applications, and one was approved by the committee, I believe, just last week. So in total, the number of units of affordable units being constructed is 24, with the number of total units being incentivized is 19. Due to the fact that one of the buildings that's been permitted has 15 units and the other being 9. Again, so out of the total $2 million budget that we've set aside for this program, $380,000 has been allocated to date. So the proposed amendment before you proposes to remove that 10-unit cap for grant program applications. What this will do ultimately is provide larger funding opportunities to nonprofit housing developers. Unlike other grant programs, a lot of the uptake questions, and I guess a lot of in housing in general, is that they just wish there was more money. They wish there was more that they could do. The value in terms of what we're providing can equate to essentially 1 door if you're looking at a per door cost. And again, trying to help those nonprofits in any which way we can to further our support for those projects, because some can get off the ground with 10 units. Some may need more funding to get to that 10 to 15, knowing we're ultimately trying to hit to that 76 units over the 3 years. But really, we want to try to create as many as we possibly can. By lifting this grant program, we'll be able to assist nonprofits with the escalating costs of land and construction. We're seeing, again, costs are not going down. They may be stabilizing somewhat, but again, those nonprofits really have a challenge when it comes to acquiring land, competing versus the market, and the ongoing construction costs that are associated with these types of developments. And if we were to remove this cap, this will assist us to reach that affordable housing unit and grant policy targets faster. So what we're looking at here at the outset was 10 projects, trying to incentivize at least 10 doors to equal that 100. What we're seeing in the uptake in year 1 is that we may not see the full 10 projects that we'd hope for, but we will see the units. So what we've looked at here is try to figure out, with this respect to this grant program, a compromise that would help us enable those 100 doors and ensure that we get there as quickly as we can. Ultimately, the recommendation is that Moncton City Council amend the following policy having an effective date of December 2nd, 2024. The Affordable Housing Half Nonprofit Development Grant Program. And you would have seen in your CRF that there would be a retroactive item to this due to Housing for Life, who was approved into the grant program for the initial 10. If approved by council tonight, we would subsequently provide 5 more doors or $100,000 worth of funding to that project, which again is really exciting as a new nonprofit getting shovels in the ground. That would be another, changing this policy, we would be enabling a further $100,000 to that group. That would conclude my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I actually have, first up, Councillor Leger, do you wish to move this recommendation? And Councillor Edgett, you're up next. Did you wish to second it? All right, so I'd ask that on the mover and seconder page, if you could indicate that. Awesome, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Edgett, did you have a question?
And I just wanted to make one comment, Your Worship. Sure. Thank you very much, Josh. I think your comments concerning using this money as soon as possible and getting into the hands of the proper people is what we want to be doing with this Housing Accelerator program. And really thank you for bringing this forward. I support it 100%. And if there's more opportunities for us to support and get the housing going, we're all ears. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Theriault.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Merci beaucoup, Josh. Does this include Rising Tide?
Yeah, it certainly would, as a nonprofit housing builder. I would note, too, that we've incentivized these 15 units to date, but Rising Tide has also been constructing other 8-unit developments, and they've chosen not to apply for the grant program due to other avenues of funding that they have. But as a nonprofit housing developer, Rising Tide would be eligible for this grant program as well, yes.
And where are these located throughout the city? How are they distributed in each ward? Do we know how many we have in Ward 1, for example?
We could certainly do a drop the ward maps over top of the city and locate those properties. They've done a pretty good job. I believe they have at least one 8-unit in every ward. There's one being constructed now in Ward 2, for example, on Main Street, one being constructed on Louisville Avenue. But they've been generally dispersed. I believe there are 2 or 3 in Ward 1, but with the size of Ward 1, they're spaced out quite a ways from one another. But the 2 grant programs that we have approved for, one would be in the downtown for the Housing for Life project, and the other would be, I believe, in Ward 4, just on the northern side of Mountain Road through the rezoning application that was recently approved by Council for Youth Impact.
In Ward 1, in one particular area, there are at least 5. So, and they're quite close, so we all agree that this is great, but we want to make sure that we don't create ghettos so that the northern part of the city and the center of Moncton and everywhere else, we cover these other areas as well. So
Yeah.
will we have a map of these buildings?
We can certainly put a map together for you and share it and direct share through to Council. Yeah, that would be no trouble. Yeah.
Okay, merci, Josh.
Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Thanks for the presentation, Josh. Can you explain what the reasoning behind the 10-unit cap? Why were we at 10?
Yeah. So at the outset of all of our grant programs, we were trying to incentivize as many projects as we could. So the 10 cap is not dissimilar from what we've done in our growth areas grant program. We have a unit cap for our downtown densification. The business improvement area grant program that we brought through, they all have a cap. And the idea behind that was to give the program a year to figure out how are we doing, let's see how much uptake we get to these grant programs. And the idea would be to try to incentivize 10 nonprofit affordable housing projects. However, like in the first year, we've had 2 that have come through the grant program. And really, it's the only file so far that we're seeing that probably doesn't have an uptake that's going above and beyond where it could be. The good news is our soft cost grant program, which was to the value of $100,000 for 5 projects, was snapped up immediately. Some of these nonprofit projects, just due to the nature of the nonprofit or the complexity of the work that they're trying to do, can take a little longer to come on stream. However, in review, the administration and the projects that we're aware of, that hitting that 10 project milestone was going to be tough, and we want to make sure that we're spending all of this money as quickly as we can, or allocating that money. And specifically for nonprofits, it's allowing them to be a little bit more competitive, so maybe they can buy the land, or they're going to be able to push the project forward, because at that level, that extra $100,000 or that extra amount of doors will really be a game changer for them. Yeah.
For sure. And if we compare to other cities, provinces, everybody's doing the same thing. Are we ahead of the game, or?
Yeah, there will be more to come in our overall half report. But the good news is that every grant program is performing strongly, and our overall unit count, we are we're more than on track with where we need to be. Yeah. So we'll provide once I believe the CMHC deadline is the 15th of December. So once that annual report is put together and put into a nice package, I'll be able to replicate it here with council and go into more detail about not only the grant programs, but the other systemic initiatives that the city is working on to kind of reduce those barriers to housing.
That's great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? I think we can go to the vote now. And just want to thank you, Josh, and your team for, your commitment to this flexibility and innovative problem solving. It's really excellent to see. Just asking everyone to vote. And I think that's it. And it is 11 yeas, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
Sorry. The next item is 10.4, and it's a 2024-2028 Canada Community Building Fund Capital Investment Plan. The motion before council is that Moncton City Council adopt the City of Moncton's 5-year capital investment plan for the Canada Community Building Fund 2024-2028.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there a presentation? Or you're just here to answer questions? Oh, sorry, I need you to, there we go. Go
Not
ahead.
a formal presentation, but I can
Okay.
make a couple of comments, just explanatory
Sure.
comments, if that helps
ahead.
council a little bit. So basically, just to explain, the Canada Community Building Fund is the new name of what used to be called Gas Tax Fund. So that every year, the city gets allocated based on pro rata number of citizens as percentage, and we've continued to get that, and that forms part of the funding that we get for our capital budget. So every 5 years, we're required to do this capital investment fund plan, send it to the provincial government who administers it on behalf of the feds, with listing of the projects that we're going to fund from gas tax. So basically, what's included in the CRF is a list, and tried to summarize the actual gas tax investment plan, sort of a cumbersome document. So I sent a spreadsheet of the projects that were included in the capital budget that was approved, both 2024 and the 2025 that you just approved last week. So basically, we need to send that in. We've received the first half of funding for 2024. Upon sending this approved motion from council, we'll get the second half and also 2025's share. This year, in 2024, the amount we get is $5.6 million. In 2025, it's $5.9, and it escalates a little bit year to year. That's already included in funding in our capital budget. It's really a formality to get this in. We will bring it back to council every budget year because they've changed the requirements, the way I have to be more specific on the plan. Streets, actual latitude, longitude, GIS information. So in the document, the 24-25 details are there at a very finite level. So in the end of in 26's capital budget, when we bring it forward, we'll get those details, bring it back as a formality to council, send it to the province again. So it's really approving this formally, send it to the province, then we'll receive our second half payment in 24 and subsequent 25.
Thank you very much, Greg. Councillor Richard, I have you up first. Do you wish to move the motion? Thank you. And Councillor Bourgeois, I have you up after that. Do you wish to second it? Could I ask you to do so on the screen, please? All right, thank you. And I'll go back to you, Councillor Richard.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Thanks, Greg, for presenting that. Longitude, latitude, lots of them in that form. But it was you, not me. So when you're talking about the pro rata census population, so does this mean that the amount can go up and down versus the actual?
It will. Basically, right now, the funds are based on the 2021 census, when I think probably the next census is 2026. So that what's proposed for would be 27, 28, could in fact go up, assuming our proportion of population in New Brunswick changes.
Okay. So also, so we've just come out of budget, and we approved a lot of projects. Some of these projects are in this plan.
Yep.
That we've approved the full amount to budget.
Correct.
In that, so I calculated a little over 41 million for the projects. Then about a little over 29 million would be given in from the gas tax would be coming in, and that the municipality would be left with 11.5 million, let's say.
Correct. Yes.
What happens to the monies that we budgeted into these projects? Because we're going to be getting money for them from the gas tax. Is that already separated? Is that?
That's already in the capital budget that we presented last week. That's already separated out, is accounted for in that capital budget already.
It's separated in the projects?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, I missed that one because I went looking last night.
Yeah, and it's on the bottom, but if I can give you a document that sort of shows the details of what it's.
Does it
didn't
show
get
on the
that
summaries?
finite at the
Would
capital
that show on
budget.
the summaries?
In the recovery line, yes, it does, in the recovery lines. But we can list out for you it will agree exactly to these projects. It's just it gets very cumbersome in the capital document to show, here's how each one's being financed. It does show in the recovery of those project summaries.
Okay, because I have a project summary open from the budget we just went through.
Yep.
And there's no differences.
It shows a recovery line, which could be, that recovery could be capital from operating, it could be gas tax.
1,845,000 on a project, and
Yep.
there's no, it's mentioned in your plan, but it's not. I'm
It's-
just questioning just to see if,
Yeah, and there's a recovery line in that project summary. You see there's probably a cost and recovery line, and the recovery line shows minus 1,845 as well. I don't have it in front of me, Counselor, but.
oh, Oh, that's what that is.
That's what that is in there, correct.
Oh,
So that would be recovery part of this 1.6, and the rest would be, that would be public capital from operating if we're showing the full recovery.
okay, beautiful. Thank you for the explanation.
You're welcome, no problem, thank you.
Councillor Bourgeois.
Merci, Madame la Maire. Merci, Greg. I had a question that's similar but different to Councillor Richard about the allocation based on population. So there are two agreements, 24-28, 25-29. Is it in the program, it's set in stone that it will be the last census data that we use, so 2021, and then modifications will be brought once the 2026 data, census data are out? Or can we use Statistics Canada estimates for population on a yearly basis?
Historically, what they've done is they've used the census as the official data that they've used and when they've determined this. So as far as I'm aware, it's going to be the census data that comes out in 2026 that will adjust the amounts in future.
Okay. The problem is, the 21 census, we had like 80,000, 79,900 and some. We're up to 92, 93,000 now. We probably will be, let's say, 95,000 by the 26th census. And then if everything goes the way that we anticipate it'll go, we're going to use 95,000. At least it's better than 80,000. But the growth will continue, and the amount per capita will stay fixed at 95,000, but our population is estimated to go to about 120,000 by 2031. So is there any flexibility in that program to readjust because of our significant growth?
At this point, that's their process. However, we'll advocate and communicate to them similar to what you're thinking. We feel the same way. As we grow, we should be recognizing each year. It's really what is that statistical reliable number that everybody across the country is going to rely upon, right? So we'll obviously advocate. It's great if you're a growing city. You may not want it if you're not a growing city, right? So it's both sides of the coin. But certainly we'll communicate that accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. Merci. Merci, Madame la Maire.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we can move to the vote on this. And I think that's everyone. Yay. Unanimous support for federal money. That's good. Next item.
Okay, the next would have been readings of bylaw, les lectures des arrêtés municipaux, and there are none this evening. Next is resolutions. And there's four of them coming before council, and they're quite lengthy, so you're going to have to bear with me here for the mover and the seconders. Just 1 second. The 12.1 is withdrawal from the Utility Capital Reserve Fund, whereas Section 117.7 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on City Council to create a Utility Capital Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that the withdrawals made from the Utility Capital Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for the 2024 meter replacement program be made from the Utility Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council with costs to date for 2024 totaling $135,000, whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for sanitary sewer component costs relating to the street reconstruction number 1 capital project be made from the Utility Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decisions of council with the cost to date for 2024 totaling $78,824. Therefore, be it resolved that the sum of $213,824 be released from the Utility Capital Reserve Fund for being the procedures dictated by way of provincial legislation.
Thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this? Thank you, Councillor Butler. Seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. Could I ask that you do that on the screen, please? Great.
Okay.
I think we can move to the voting on this.
Vote.
All those in favor signify by saying aye or yay.
Everybody's voted.
And it is unanimous. Thank you very much.
12.2 is withdrawal from General Capital Reserve Fund, whereas Section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on the City Council to create a General Capital Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that withdrawals from the General Capital Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for the Avenir Center major maintenance and rehabilitation annual payment as per the operating and maintenance agreement be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council in the amount of $454,401.11. Whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for the 2024 city fleet purchases be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decisions of council with cost to date totaling $2,630,378. Whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for Kodiak Transpo capital purchases be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council with cost to date totaling $907,438. Whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for interest mitigation and use the reserves as a funding mechanism against a capital purchase be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council with cost to date totaling $3,413,700. Whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for the 2024 City Life Cycle purchase be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council with costs to date totaling $1,784,499. Whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal for the 2024 City Capital Purchase be made from the General Capital Reserve Fund by way of adopted decision of council with costs to date totaling $773,326. Therefore, be it resolved that the sum of $9,963,742.11 be released from the General Capital Reserve Fund, this being the procedure dictated by way of provincial legislation.
Thank you for that. Councillor Legier, I have you up first. Do you wish to move this recommendation? Thank you. And is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Edgett. I would ask that you indicate that on the screen.
Councillor Legier.
Terrific. Thank you. I think we can move to the vote.
Need to get to the vote. There we go.
Excellent. Unanimous. Thank you very much. Next one.
Deposits to General Capital Reserve. Whereas Section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on City Council to create a General Capital Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that deposits made into the General Capital Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends the deposits of $119,026.22 be made to the General Capital Reserve Fund consisting of net proceeds from the sale of fleet equipment, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a deposit of $2,371,035 be made to the General Capital Reserve Fund consisting of annual development charges for the 2024, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a deposit of $300,000 be made to the General Capital Reserve Fund representing funding for salt plow trucks, Therefore, be it resolved that that authorization be granted for a deposit in the amount of $2,790,061.22 be made into the General Capital Reserve Fund.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to move this recommendation? Thank you. Is there a seconder for it? Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. I'd ask that you indicate on your screen. Terrific. Thank you very much for that. I believe we can move to the vote.
Should come up.
Excellent. I think that's everybody. Yep. And it passes unanimously. Thank you.
And the last one.
Yay.
Withdrawal from General Operating Reserve Fund, whereas Section 101 of the Local Governance Act of New Brunswick confers powers on City Council to create a General Operating Reserve Fund, and whereas the said act requires that withdrawals be made from the General Operating Reserve Fund be authorized by resolution, and whereas the City Treasurer recommends a withdrawal from the General Operating Reserve Fund to be made by way of adopted decisions of council with costs to date totaling $192,231 for various city budget initiatives. Therefore, be it resolved that the sum of $192,231 be released from the General Operating Reserve Fund, this being the procedures dictated by way of provincial legislation.
Terrific. Thank you. Is there someone who wishes to move this? Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Butler. I'd ask that you indicate that on the screen. Terrific. Thank you. And I believe we can move to the vote now.
Should come up. There it goes.
And that's it. Ooh, we're getting very fast at this. Thank you very much.
I believe
It
you
passes
have-
unanimously. And yes, tonight I do have some nominations. To the Events Moncton Advisory Committee, 3 reappointments: Larry Nelson, Bill Whalen, and Ray Roberge. To the Rising Tides Board of Directors, Isabelle LeBlanc, she will be replacing Jocelyn Cahoon. And to the Destination Moncton Dieppe Board, Isabelle LeBlanc, again, replacing Jocelyn Cahoon. Is there someone who wishes to make that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Kingston. And just hold on for a second there. And is there a seconder? Councillor LeBlanc, I would ask that you would do that on the screen that's going to appear in a second. Yeah, I forgot about that too. Oh, is it in? Okay. Okay, so I would ask that Councillor Kingston and Councillor LeBlanc indicate. Thank you. And I believe I don't see any questions. I think we can move to the vote. And 11 in favor. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I believe this concludes today's agenda. Councillor Richard, would you do us the honors? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.